Okay, so welcome to Also Known As. I am AK Liss, and I am joined by Joya Colucci-Lord, all the way from Virginia. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, Lake of the
That's
Woods,
right. In Lake of the Woods, Virginia, where it's snowing right now.
where it's
It's not
snowing.
supposed to be, but it is heavily.
Yeah. So all rugged up and keeping warm.
Yes, we are. Yes, we
And
are.
and I think a little while ago, I think it was like towards Christmas or something last year, you guys over there had quite severe snow.
We did, but we survived.
You
We
survived.
survived.
That's good.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess just for viewers who might have caught the Jimmy Dean's Last Dance episode, where we had the full cast on there, you obviously in the show there, and during the show and like in preparation for the show, one of the things that I picked up on was that your background was obviously in the military, and 21 years in the military from the information that I picked up, and then we were talking about what your experiences were during your service, and part of that was in communications,
What?
and yeah, and that really, I think the whole reason why I started this podcast was to connect with people and sort of form a community with people that worked in fields, not just in creativity, but also in fields where communication was key. And so I was really interested in kind of diving in because we didn't really get a chance to talk that much during the episode. But I thought it was a great opportunity for me to step outside of that and see and find out a little bit more about who you are and what your background is and how you came to get into that field and where it's taken you. And it sounded quite interesting to me. So yeah, so I guess I looked at your bio on the JC Gooden Inc. Website, which is your company,
Yes, it is.
um, and immediately the first thing that stood out to me is actually we have something in common, which was interesting. So your company seems to deal with proposal preparation and proposal management,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, and correct me if I get anything wrong, but I've tried to get a bit of information around that. But my background's actually my major discipline that I worked in is procurement and contract management. Uh, so as I was reading through, I was seeing a lot of the same language and the same skill sets that I use in my day to day before I got into compliance and into compliance management, and then prior to that, I was in procurement and contract management. So seeing that you worked in that field was really interesting to me. So let's take it back though. You studied at the University of the State of New York, and you had a bachelor's in Russian language and comms. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. So
Right.
I actually had a distance degree because I was privileged and fortunate to attend the military's language school, actually for 4 separate courses. So I have about a the equivalent of a very rusty master's degree in Russian.
Okay.
So I studied in Monterey, California, and the University of the State of New York, SUNY Albany. They converted my credits and granted my degree in
So
in so I actually never went to the school, which is
right.
kind of an interesting thing.
Okay. So let's take it back even further then. Monterey.
Yes, Monterey, California, beautiful
Is,
Monterey by the sea and the home of the Defense Language Institute,
are
where
you from
they
Monterey, or is
No,
that
I'm from
somewhere
Boston. I'm
you're
from
from
Boston.
Boston?
So I drove
Okay.
on a Friday afternoon um, in 1981. I was working as a government contractor for the Air Force, a young kid, basically. And everyone I worked with was in the Air Force. And I said, oh, that would be a really good idea, to get some travel and get some education. And gee, maybe I'll join the Air Force. And I went to the recruiting station on a Friday afternoon. And we Army people have a joke about the Air Force that, the Air Force recruiters weren't there because it was Friday afternoon. They'd already gone home and started their weekend. So the Army got me.
Right.
And I saw a sign and it said $3,500 bonus. And I said, what do I have to do to get that? And they said, you have to go to language school, which is the only thing I wanted to do all my life is be an interpreter.
Right. So
And
where's that come from though? Where's that come from, that desire to be an interpreter? And
um,
um
so my family is pretty much bilingual. My father was Italian and my mother was Italian American, and she learned Italian, and they got married and had me, and I learned Italian and started
I
taking
saw that
Spanish.
photo that you posted on Facebook, of your mum, and um it was really cool to see that photo because it spoke. um there were volumes spoken in the image. It was a very cool photo. The looking at each other, the like, I think there's something to be said for an age where everything seemed to be spontaneous. It was just in the moment, and that image really captured it. So tell me about your parents. Did they come over, or they born here, or
My
born in
mother
the
was
States?
born here. My mother was born here, and my father came over at 26 years old with $50 in his pocket and came to marry a girl in the United States, not my mother. And he got here and he realized that that was just not the right thing to do. And his friends set him up with my mother, who didn't want to go out with him because he didn't speak English. And they were married for 60 years, I think, when my mother passed, and then my father passed a few years later. And it was a great love story. And I
Yeah,
love that is my favorite, one of my favorite photos of all time, because it just does harken back to that era. And we always said that my father looked like James Dean in that picture with his cigarette. So
it's in the attitude, right? It's
it is. It
it's
is.
something about that I don't know, carelessness, or not carelessness, but you know, I guess confidence. It's a confidence, that comes
Yeah.
in there. So your father was a confident man. I'm taking it.
Oh
He
yeah.
was
Yeah.
very self assured.
He
And
was he was confident and funny and just a great guy.
how
And
much
he and
how
my
much
mother were a good pair.
how much does that feed into who you are as a person? How much does that play a part in your your personality and your motivations and your decision making?
That's very interesting. I always say that I got the best of both worlds, growing up in a home where we still embraced the culture of where my father was from, which was Italy, and my whole family's Italian, and we do all the Italian things. I've got all of his like all the old Italian guy sayings, and
Yeah.
they really do make sense. They make sense. And we were actually talking about this last night that my father would say, um, don't worry about things. It's like paying a mortgage on a house you don't own because it doesn't change and, it doesn't get you anything just to worry. So,
Yeah.
um, in that way, I'm so much like him. But interestingly, so my mother was a draftsman
Okay.
and did technical drafting, and my father was a hairstylist.
Right.
So
Okay.
that
So
kind of guided a lot of who I am and made me a lot of who I am because, I had no preconceived notion that a man has to do this job and a woman has to do that job. And, the woman can be the boss and the
yeah.
man can
Yeah.
have a creative field. And I think that really That goes to what you said. That is really what made me who I am.
And does that is that the same with you and Bill? You guys, I think you're married in 2009, is that right?
We got married in 2009 on March 13th, and tomorrow is our 13th anniversary.
Well, happy anniversary to you
Well, thank
guys.
you.
That's it. So
Yeah.
so did you know Bill for a while before you got married, or was it sort of a whirlwind romance, or what was the deal?
We we met when we were 8 years old. We were in 3rd
Oh wow.
grade together,
Okay.
and we were high school sweethearts, and we went our separate ways, and we had separate lives and separate families and marriages and lost spouses.
Yep.
At a young age, both of us lost our spouse and found each other living several hours apart. We're from Massachusetts. We found each other in Virginia. So, that's for all the people out there who don't know US geography, that's about a 500-mile, 5-state span. So, having found each other so close together, we kind of had a whirlwind romance.
Yeah, real interstate love story, hey?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We burned up
So
the highway.
you and Bill seem I like just obviously I've only known you a short while, and it's mainly through being fortunate enough to have both of you on the book. But what I pick up is that you've got such a comfortable relationship. It seems really comfortable and really is that something that comes with just the fact that you've known each other so long, or is it that you're on the same wavelength, you speak the same language, and you sort of have the same
We
drivers?
we do, and part of it is that we've known each other for so long. And I'll go back to another one of my father's old Italian sayings. The translation is that find your ox and your spouse from your hometown because you will always know their provenance.
Right,
And
of
I
course.
think there are things that we get that we'll just say one word and we know what we're talking about.
Mm,
So,
yeah,
and oddly enough, we just had friends move into our neighborhood who were our friends. Bill's next door neighbor from age 8 as kids, best man at our wedding, moved down the street from us here in Virginia.
yep.
And it's kind of the same thing is that we know them so well because we're all from the same place and other people just don't get it.
And is that a hard thing in the States? Is it a hard thing to find your tribe or find your community, or is it something that's pretty easy? I mean,
I
I don't know about you, but Australia is obviously quite a big, wide open space, and for me, I've always found it challenging to form close knit relationships. But regardless of that, I do seem to have really close friends, but they're not connected in a lot of ways, and I seem to be the only glue that holds them together. So, when you've been through that experience of, living a life separate to someone else, and then coming together after a period of time, even though you've known them from an early age, do do you find that um, your community or the people that you associate with or know, does that makeup change because of the fact that you've had a bit of a evolution in your own life, and a bit of a change in where you've
hmm.
come from?
So, yes. Yes.
Right.
Having been in the military 21 years, moving around country to
Yep.
country, place to place, you kind of have to find your tribe wherever
Mm,
you go. And so I'm really used to finding a new group where I feel like I fit in.
mm,
When we moved to the home we're in now 6 years ago, we knew nobody here,
mm,
and we were fortunate enough to meet a neighbor who took us in, introduced us to everyone. She has lived here and raised a family for 50 years. And so we had that opportunity to meet some new people, and then we started to be the people who were bringing people into the group, because where we live is a place that was generally a weekend community. And so
Yeah.
now that it's becoming a full-time community, people are all looking for their group.
Right. Right. And I think that would make it easier then, to a certain degree,
Yeah.
to kind of connect, and because people are all kind of looking for the same thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 81, you go across to Monterey, um, and you get into the army. You enter into the army. That's right. Okay. So what's next? You was it
So I
was it was it uh, a weird was it what was the experience like going in? I imagine that would be kind of a different time in the military, and a different, you would have maybe seen changes over time. So
I
what
saw a
was it
lot of
like?
changes. So when I went in, I was 23 years old. I had no idea what I was going to be in for. I was a
Hmm.
little older than many of the people I've enlisted with.
Hmm.
Um, but it was all the stuff you hear on TV about going to basic training and doing push ups and people yelling at you all the time.
Mm,
And I think that my perspective at that point, I was old enough to know that, first of all, they're not going to kill you.
mm,
They can't kill you. They can yell at you. Okay. I've been yelled at before. Um, and this is all going to be over in this number of days,
mm,
and counted down day by day by day. And then I was off to I graduated from basic training, and I threw grenades and I crawled in the mud and I shot rifles and all that army stuff.
mm.
And then I went off to Monterey, California, where it was like sitting in a college class, 8 hours a day, learning a language. Um, the only difference was that I was wearing a uniform, and it was a fabulous experience. And I went to my first duty assignment. It was in Berlin, and the wall was still up, and it was a world of intrigue.
Right.
Most of it's pretty boring,
No,
honestly.
look, I
Yeah,
get that. I
but
mean,
yeah,
I read a book years ago called The Company, and it was about a station chief. Well, there are several different characters, but one of them was a station chief, and he was in Berlin, and it's a lot of, I guess, grind, a lot of, you know, kind of same different
yep,
day.
yep.
Um, so I imagine that would be the case, but I guess, when you're entering into that environment, and particularly that time in history where it is fraught in different ways, not in the same way that we have now, but in a different, I guess, a different kind of environment where it is very kind of espionage, and intelligence and that kind of thing played a crucial part in keeping the lines where they needed to be. So would you, I guess, did you have a perception? Did you have a preconceived perception when you were sent there, that of what you'd be doing, or was it sort of you just kind of went in and tried not to form an opinion, and tried not to have an idea about what you'd be doing and what you'd be involved in?
Hmm. Well, my training was such that I knew what I was going to be doing, and I spent a lot of time sitting in a building with no windows wearing headphones.
Right.
And so, the great um, intelligence gathering spy stories that people hear, that wasn't my life.
Right. Of
That was
course.
not
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah. Of
Um,
course.
but it was Rather interesting. I did learn a little bit of German while I was there, and oddly, Germans love to speak English. So,
Yeah,
if you start speaking to them in German, they say, "Oh, no, no, let me practice my English," which was okay. Um, but it was a lot of waiting around, bored to death,
yeah,
hoping hoping that you would hear something very interesting and hoping that you wouldn't.
yeah. Of course, of
If you know
course.
what I mean. So
Oh
in other
yeah, all
words,
the time. Yeah.
everybody wants to get the great tidbit, but you
Mm.
don't want it to be that Chernobyl just
Yeah,
exploded.
of course, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case with most people, like we all have this idea that if we're in that situation it'd be very exciting and whatever, but I think for certainly for my case, I don't know what I would do if I was ever in that situation where I heard or whatever, but I guess the appeal for you was really the language thing, right? It was
It
like,
really was. It
yeah.
really was. And
So,
my career evolved. So I started out doing intelligence type things. And
hmm
then my career evolved and I got some more training and education and improved my language skills even more. And I was able to go into arms control and work as an interpreter, which I think is the ultimate job for anyone who studies a language.
so tell
And
me
then it
about that.
evolved even more. So I worked in arms control during the INF, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, as it began, and then moved into the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the Chemical Weapons Convention, and the START Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. And I worked in all of those areas, and I worked as an interpreter, um, which to me, and I think we kind of touched on this during the other show, is that the job of an interpreter and the job of an audiobook narrator are really quite similar because your job is conveying the intent of the author and conveying it accurately and with the same feeling that the author intended, whereas the job of the interpreter is to tell the story of the speaker in another language while still conveying their intent and their emotion.
Mm.
So it's really quite similar. And
And do you think there's a chance that, like, i- is there any chance ever when as an interpreter that you worry that you'll be misinterpreting, or that or what you'll say is misinterpreted, more to the point, like you might get it right, but it doesn't quite hit the mark, or is there a skill set in that regard where you have to actually, you're not just repeating something that someone's saying, you're actually conveying inflection and emotion and a lot of different things that go on behind the words, right? It's not
yes,
just a case of
yes.
repeating verbatim.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why they call it interpreting and not translating.
Of course.
In the field. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, that's my translator," and really, it should be your interpreter. Um, yes, we all worry about that. We've all, every American interpreter, maybe every interpreter around the world, has heard the story of um, "I lust after the Polish people," when the actual word was "I have a great affection for the people of Poland." I mean, there's a slight but important difference.
Mm.
Um, and so we are always, always afraid of that, making that one big mistake and becoming famous for it. But even more so when you're working in arms control, there's a potential international incident in
Mm.
play. So we're all very careful. We always had our backup person, and if you felt like, okay, I need a break, you would tag them in, kind of.
And do you think as time's gone on, that skill has changed somewhat because of technology and the way that technology's advanced. And, I don't know about you, but it seems that communication has actually gotten worse with the more things that we have to communicate with. There's the spread of misinformation, there's all that kind of stuff, because we do a lot of reading, we do a lot more reading, but we don't necessarily have the skill to interpret what's being written. We can't read between the lines.
Yes, I will agree with you 100%. And I think that one one piece of technology that has really affected that is the text message. We, instead of picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, AK, I have such and such problem. Can you help me out with it?" We, you know, sit behind our phone and it's like, "I need this."
Mm. Yeah,
It
of
lo-
course.
Text messaging and even Facebook and social media, it lacks tone. It truly
Yeah,
lacks tone. And not everyone is a great author.
that's exactly right.
Some
Yeah.
people don't write. It's difficult for them, and it's
Yeah.
difficult to understand them.
So the next thing that I came across, obviously, things have gotten quite interesting over the last few weeks with the world stage. And um, I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was, just to, without dwelling on it too much, but as someone that has served in the military and as someone that has been, in different parts of the world, and particularly with language, what's your take on where we're at the moment? What do you think? And
Okay.
and I don't want to put you on the spot, so if you don't
No,
want to answer,
no,
that's
no, and
fine.
I and this is interesting. I anticipated this question
Yep.
actually. And I lived in Moscow for 3 years.
Mm.
And what I will say, I'm going to start out by saying Slava Ukraini, which means glory to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I saw the breakup of the Soviet Union. I have been lived in Russia. I have been to most of the former Soviet republics. I've been to Ukraine several times, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, now members of NATO. Um, and There are many wonderful Russian people. There really are.
Of course. Yeah.
There,
Yeah.
there are wonderful people everywhere. Um, that does not necessarily represent I will say it absolutely does not represent their government, or their government does not represent those good souls.
Mm.
Um, from a military perspective, um, the Ukraine, I have a feeling that somewhere in the etymology of the word Ukraine is badass. Those people are just fearless, heroic, and badass. And if I have to hear another person say that the president of Ukraine won on Dancing with the Stars and did the voice for such and such, no. The person who won on Dancing with the Stars then became the president of Ukraine.
Mm.
Thank
Yeah.
you. But talk about just people who are fearless, who are uh, fiercely patriotic
Mm.
to their homeland, um, who have endured not just this hardship, but the hardship of the Soviet Union.
Mm.
Um, it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking.
Mm.
From a military standpoint, though, setting up your command post at Chernobyl is brilliant because nobody's going to come take it out. It'd be a environmental disaster.
Mm.
Um, I was very fortunate. I met a wonderful person in Moscow. In 2000, I was at the ambassador's house for the election returns breakfast. And I was standing there, and this very lovely man stood next to me, and we started talking, and it was Mikhail Gorbachev. And all I can think is that he and Ronald Reagan became good friends. And Ronald Reagan is now rolling in his grave, and Mikhail Gorbachev is face palming over all of this. And
Mm,
I just, every day I turn on the news and I say, I I can't believe this is
mm,
happening. And I
mm,
mean, it's what happens when it's what happens to governments when a narcissistic madman is in charge.
mm. A lot of it, I feel, is to do with communication, though. I feel that, we we have barriers to communicating effectively, even though we've got all of the channels there. We just don't, and I think,
Yes.
from my very, 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 very far and distant removed place in the world, in the most isolated city in the world, one of the most isolated cities in the world. um, it's it's really hard to have confidence in your opinion, because you're viewing everything through a lens of what the media portrays, or what social media portrays, or any number of things, and all you can really lean on is the fact that it all comes down to communication. And I remember reading a story actually about Ronald Reagan, how he actually came to talk to Gorbachev was watching a movie called The Day After, and it actually made him horrified that that could potentially happen on his watch. And so he started talking, and he started extending the talks with someone who was a political opponent, and I think that takes a great deal of courage, when you're not sure about what the outcome's going to be, but you make the attempt anyway to talk and to communicate and to you know start a dialogue of peace, or at least compromise. So yeah, so I don't know where we'll end up, but hopefully cooler heads
Yeah.
will prevail, and those dialogues of peace will happen.
Yeah. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and it is a historically it's a historic fact that the Soviet Union were masters of misinformation to their own people, and it's happening again, and it's very sad. And I hope that cooler heads will prevail, and I pray for the people of Ukraine to get their lives and their country back. It's
As do
just
I.
sad. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And Ronald Reagan was the great communicator. It's the way we all refer to him.
That's right. So,
Yeah.
okay. So tell me, what is a cryptologic school for effective agency writing?
Oh, okay. So, um, one of our intelligence agencies in the United States has I was an adjunct professor for them, and I taught English. I taught
Okay,
writing, and
okay,
primarily because in my field we had people who were native speakers of their target language. So we had a lot of Spanish speakers who were not native English speakers, Puerto Ricans, Latin Americans who joined the U.S. military, etc. My job was helping them to improve their writing in English so that they could write intelligence reports.
right. Okay, okay. So, cryptology is obviously again a kind of a interpretation skill. Yeah,
It's code breaking,
yeah,
more
yeah.
code breaking, and they call it that, but I wasn't a code breaker.
Right. Okay.
It's just the entire field, and
Yeah.
language
Okay.
is a part.
Okay. So 21 years is a long time. I imagine there's a lot of stuff that happened in between the start of, hey, I'm going to Monterey, and where you are now. And take me through that. Like, let me. What's the path for you once you've kind of heading towards your end point with the military, and you're moving, was it hard for you to leave after such a long period of service?
No. Surprisingly, it was not.
Not the
Um,
answer I was expecting, but okay, I'll take
no,
it.
it wasn't. Um, I had been there for 21 years, and it was time for me to do something else.
Yep,
Not that I didn't love what I did, because I had a great career. I mean, the last 3 years of my career I spent in Moscow. I spent living in a hotel. I lived in a Marriott Grand Hotel. People treated me like royalty. It was wonderful. But I it was time for me to go and do something else.
right.
Um,
So,
which I know that just seems very like, okay, it's
but
over.
but how do you get to that point, when you've dedicated a significant portion of your life to, I mean, I know where I was at 23. Certainly wasn't where you were. Uh, I know where I'm at 45. But I couldn't imagine if I don't know, I get quite wedded to roles, so I find it
Mhm.
very, very difficult to move on from things that I'm doing. And so if I had done something for that long, I I don't know that I could find it that easy, like to move on. I imagine it would be because you had something in mind that you wanted to do, some
Yeah,
direction
yeah.
that you wanted to take.
So the military makes it a little bit easier to move on
Right.
because you move on every several years.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, so I moved around
Yep.
maybe less than some people, but I did
Mm.
move around quite a bit.
Yep.
And, overseas and back to the States and back to a school and overseas again. Um, and I hit all 50 of the United States during my career in
Mm.
one way or another. And so that makes it a little bit easier to move
Mm.
and easier to go do something else because every job is slightly different. Um, but it also makes you very resilient, and it makes you very flexible, and you can meet people more easily. The one thing though is that when you're in the military and you go to a new duty assignment, everybody else is in the same boat. At one point or another, they've come in, they've come out, they've been new, they've been old. So they get you. Civilian life, it's not quite like that
Mm.
because civilians don't tend to move around as much. There are exceptions, but I know people who I went to high school with who still live at 60 years old, still live in the same town they grew up in.
Mm.
Um, so it wasn't hard to leave, but it was different. And
Yeah.
they entice you with that retirement paycheck anyway, so.
Right. Yeah. 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 So
you know.
so you come out, you're back in civilian life. You what what is the what's the next thing for you? What do you do in terms of your career? What have you how do you get those skills that you've developed over the 21 years in the military, really unique and impressive skills?
Mhm.
How do you make that work in the civilian sector?
So I I went to work for a government contractor.
Right.
And while I was still in the military, while I was in Moscow, I got my master's degree in journalism,
Okay.
which I had never planned on using. I only did that because I wanted an advanced degree and I like to write. And a master's degree in journalism is not about reporting news, it's about being an administrator for media.
Mm,
And
mm.
my specialty was public relations and advertising.
Okay.
So I understood how to get a message across. I understood branding and messaging. And So I went to work for a government contractor and I was writing proposals and I was taking care of their branding and messaging and winning them a lot of great government work from good procurement people. And did that for several years, loved the company that I worked for, but realized that if I wanted to advance, either somebody would have to get fired, quit, or die in the company that I was in, so I had to move on.
Mm.
Had such a good relationship with them that my former boss is now a colleague, and we work together. We work for each other at different times.
Yeah.
Um, and the old company that I left hired me as a consultant for a while when I
Excellent.
started, and then they were bought and sold, and
Yep.
they've,
Yep.
yeah. But Um, so that's I kind of took the skills that I had gotten, analysis, writing, um, and a knowledge of certain military and government systems that we would be writing proposals for.
Yep.
Um, and that's how I turned that into a post-military career.
And do you, I mean, outside of work, outside of career, and outside of, what you've done throughout, your career, um, what part does fiction play? When you read, do you read fiction, or is your preference non-fiction, or is it what's the hook for you when it comes
I
to
love good fiction. I love good fiction. I love a good mystery
right? Okay.
or thriller. Um, I love Jimmy Dean's Last Dance.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it.
Well,
Um,
you're part of it now, so
well, I
that's
am, I am.
yeah.
Well, I joke that, it won an earphone award, but if it were based on my one very small part, it might have been an earplug award. So,
But yeah, what's the like? Obviously, married to Bill, and Bill does a lot of narration, and
yes, yes.
what's your and now you're moving into audio narration as well. So do you when you're reading, like you said, you like mystery, you said you like thrillers, but what is the what's the thing that hooks you about writing, because it's really, it's really easy. I don't know, I wouldn't say it's easy to write a book, but it's easy to write. It just doesn't necessarily have to be a good book. So what do you feel is the thing that makes a book a good book?
So, as someone who has worked in editing, I
Okay.
have people who tell me, "Oh, I hate reading books with bad grammar." Well, I like reading books where the characters are real. And
Mm,
most characters in real life don't necessarily talk good, but they're for real,
they are,
you
yeah.
know? So I've had editors go edit out every grammatical mistake from a book in the dialogue, and people just don't talk that way all of the time. Uh,
Yeah, of course.
so
I
I
think
like
that
I like characters who are real.
so do you think that comes from what you've done in your career, because you are talking to people all the time, and particularly, interpreting what people are saying in different languages as well. So there's that plays into it as well, and people that are maybe speaking English, that English is their second language, or they're not fluent in it. So is that where that draw comes from, that how people talk, how real people talk?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, when you're talking to somebody face to face, when you're talking to a person, you can kind of tell if they're phony.
Mm,
Um, when you're reading a book, you should be able to tell that from the book too. And I think that does come from my background. It's like I want to experience a real character. I don't want
Mm.
a piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that.
Yeah,
So you've started your own company.
I did.
Um, that
I quit my job on a Tuesday and started my job on a Wednesday. Started my company on a Wednesday.
And how did that feel? Like, was that, I mean, you seem like a bit of a risk taker anyway, from talking to you in this tonight, like moving from, moving across the country to start a gig in the military and traveling the world and, even, you know, taking, uh, I guess there's a certain element of risk in what you've done with your relationships as well. Like, we don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So did you? Was it scary? Was it scary for you to start your own company?
It was liberating.
Right.
It was
Okay.
absolutely liberating. So I told you that I worked for a great company and I love them, and they
Hmm.
subsequently hired me as a consultant. Well, there was a very short period in between where I had left there to go to another company where they were supposedly giving me this big promotion,
Mm.
and they really didn't, and they stuffed me in a cubicle and treated me like dirt. And they treated every other employee in my department. It wasn't me personally, it was our department. We were the redheaded stepchild of the company.
Mm.
And I went, a number of different things happened. And on the 75th day working there, I walked into my boss's office and I said, "Here's my badge, here's my key, here's my computer. I quit."
Right.
And he pulled out his little notebook and he's like, "So are you giving me 2 weeks notice?" And I said, "No, because I'm not going to sit in that cubicle and pretend to do work when in reality anything that I start, I'm going to have to immediately turn over to somebody else, so just let them do it. Let's just shake hands and go to our separate corners and part ways."
Yeah,
And
it's funny, isn't it? It's I think people devalue time. I think that's a huge thing, like people, it's something that I've like only over the past year I've really come to realize is that you've only got a finite amount of it. It's probably the most valuable thing in the world, right?
it,
Why waste it
next to
on
family.
exactly.
Yeah.
So why waste it? It's I think that's a it's really cool when you hear someone talk so plainly about it, um, you know, and so matter of factly, that
Well, I
yep,
started
this is
I
what I'm doing.
started a mass exodus from my department. And the other two of the other women um, left very shortly after that.
So was that the catalyst you needed to start JC Gooden Inc?
It was. People had been telling me, my old boss had told me, you need to be a consultant. You need to start a business. You could do a lot better than you're doing here. And I said, well, I like it here. And he's the one who said to me, look, if you want to move up, and I did, then you're going to have to, then yeah, you probably need to be somewhere else. And when I gave notice at that company, I gave them a month. And I said, I'm giving you a month notice. And he said, can I change your mind? And I said, probably not. And
Mm,
he said, money's not going to do it, is it? And I said,
mm,
no, it's really not about the money. And he said, if
yeah,
you ever want to come back, you can come back.
I think um, I think communication again. That like
Yeah.
that's what the difference was there. The communication was, oh, are you going to serve 2 weeks notice, or can I change your mind? Different conversations, same outcome but different conversations. and and probably a much better relationship as a result, after the fact. So
Absolutely.
that's right. So you move into this space where you're responsible for yourself, which I imagine, making that transition from the military where everything's quite regulated, I would say, you know, not that I've been in the military, but I've seen
Yeah.
enough and I've read enough
Yeah.
to know.
Yep.
Then you go into civilian life, which is a transition again, and working for other people, and also regulated to a certain degree because people like to manage and tell and direct and everything. And now you're suddenly the owner of your own destiny, and you're off on your way. So, um, Gooden Inc. Was that what was the genesis
So,
of the name,
okay. So my late husband's last name was Gooden. So my
right?
name was Joya Colucci-Gooden. So
Yep,
JC Gooden. And
yep.
then ink because we do things on paper. And I've had people ask me if it's a tattoo company because the ink. So that ended up being the name of the company, and I remarried and I changed my name, and it's still the name of the company, and
Of course.
that's
So,
that.
so,
Yeah.
so that's
Oh,
it.
it is wonderful. I started
So
it in 2007. This is my 15th year.
that's quite remarkable, and I imagine COVID changed the dynamic to a degree.
No,
No,
actually it didn't. So
okay,
so yeah, I am in an enviable position of having worked remotely, primarily remotely since 2007. And so when COVID happened, I mean, Zoom is the best thing that ever happened because now we can actually speak to each other and see each other. And I have a Zoom meeting with my group, with whatever group I'm working with, because we take on different clients all the time, but we have a Zoom meeting every day.
yep,
And um, it's really helped. But I will say, I actually spoke with somebody who also has a smaller, larger than mine, but a small business. And he said that they doubled their income during COVID because of the CARES Act, because they took on government contracts that dealt with testing and uh, that vaccination and
yeah, right, okay,
support things.
yeah, of
And
course.
and the same thing kind of happened to me because my clients were taking on all of these opportunities and they needed somebody to write the proposal. So we were swamped.
So I think we'll go we'll go back to that, but one of the things that you just said really interested me, right? So Zoom, and obviously there's a couple of platforms out there where you can do video conferencing, and Teams has video conferencing, and you can
Yes.
do whatever. So do you think that in some regards COVID has actually been beneficial for communication because it's forced us to get off the text, get away from that space, and move into a space where we're actually directly talking to each other and communicating with each other, without sort of just relying on emails, and I think my emails have significantly reduced since COVID happened. I don't know whether you would feel the same way or
I don't know that they've reduced so much as they've changed.
right.
So yes, so when we were kids, when I was a kid, you might remember this as well, but we had the Jetsons.
Yeah, I don't know
And
the Jetsons, of course.
The Jetsons had video phone. The
Yeah.
Jetsons were using Zoom, or Teams or whatever it was. But you could
Yeah.
and all of a sudden this has happened. It's like who thought you would carry your main communication device in something this big that fits in your pocket and goes wherever you are? And by the way, you can FaceTime or,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy to me because it's one of the things I was super nervous about starting a podcast, um, and doing this. I've been really fortunate in the fact that I know a lot of great people that have been able to participate in talking, and a lot of great stories have come out of it. But I wouldn't have been able to do that without these things in place, that have made it so easy and so accessible. And some of the conversations that I've had, I mean, this one included, it's actually taken me down a path that I didn't think I'd go down, because originally I was just going to be talking about books, but now here we are talking about interpreting and
Right.
businesses, and risk taking and all kinds of things. So it's really, I think it's opened the doors in a lot of ways that weren't there before. They were closed. So
Yeah. No, I think it's and the fact that these technologies have now matured to a point where, yeah, we're using it. We're kind of you're younger, but you're more of the
not by much,
demographic
trust
that's
me.
but um we think that, my mother-in-law, who is in her late 80s, uses FaceTime and Zoom. Who would have thought that that would have even, when we were kids, did we think that our grandparents would be? Never.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I guess, going back to when you first started um in the military, and you started down that path, and you know was there ever a time where you could see things like this happening? Was there ever a time where you kind of were able to look at, whatever was happening? Military is usually a precursor to everything that happens in civilian realm. And, was there ever a time when you thought, oh, this would be great for everyday use? This would be something that you've come across?
We had like the precursor to the internet
Yeah,
because I was in the intelligence field. I mean, that's kind of the catalyst for the internet, was the ability to transfer data
that was
over
DARPA, wasn't it?
computers. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
But the ability to transfer data electronically to places far away and not use a telephone or telegraph.
of course.
And um, part of the system that we had was almost like instant messaging. And
Cool.
it's so interesting that, I remember getting my first computer um, in the early 1990s, and we would turn it on and make sure that somebody wasn't going to pick up the telephone because, we all access the internet through our telephone line.
Yeah, yeah,
And then to think that there was a wire coming out of the wall and you do it that way. And then wait a minute, there's no wire coming out of the wall. So by the time I was halfway through my military service, that's when we really started to see the internet and technology being accessible to Joe Average.
mm, yeah. And look, we're nearly out of time, but I guess I wanted to talk about, just before we go. So obviously you've started your own business. You've worked for other people. You've been in the military. You've kind of dipped your toe in audio narration. Um,
My
so
baby toe, yeah.
yeah, yeah, baby toe. So do you want to do that? Do you want to do more of that? Would you love to do more of that?
I would love to do more of that. I would love to do more of that. What I would really love to do is children's books.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
think you'd
and
be amazing at that. I think you'd be
I would
fantastic at
love
it.
it. And
Yeah.
I think that getting children interested in reading and in books, and um making books accessible to those children who can't necessarily read with their eyes. We
Mm.
have a couple of great organizations we work with and do some volunteer work, and they produce audiobooks for children and older students with visual processing disabilities. Company called Learn. I'm going to put in a plug for Learning Ally. They're wonderful, great people, and they do a great service. And I would love to do children's books because I loved to read as a kid, and I would like other children to love to read too.
I think you'd be amazing at that, and I think you should definitely pursue that. That would be fantastic. Okay, so we're going to finish up, but I've started doing this with my guests, and I think one thing that I'd really like to hear from you is one piece of advice for the viewers and the listeners about what advice would you give to someone who is starting out in a career that is focused in communications? What's the single piece of advice that you think is probably going to help them the most?
I think it's the same advice as I would give to any kid going into anything. And I
Right.
would tell them to be authentic, to be kind, to listen as much as you speak, and above all, always be honest. Because if you think it's stinky, it probably is.
That is fantastic advice, and it's actually very timely for me. So I think it's really, really good advice. And I want to thank you so much for making some time available to come on and talk to me about your career and about your business and about you and everything that you've done. It's truly fascinating journey that you've had, and I'm so grateful for you to have come on here and spoken with me about it. So thanks so much, Joy. I really appreciate it.
AK, thank you for having me, and I'm waiting for the sequel.
Yeah, working on it.
Well, I know it doesn't happen overnight, but
Yeah,
thank you.
it's just tell Bill that Hank might not have had his last showdown just yet. So you might
We
be
all
pleased
love
to hear
Hank.
that. Yeah, of course.
Well,
Thanks.
he's waving at me. I think he heard that.
But thanks again so much, Joya. It's been an
AK,
absolute
thank you.
blast talking to you.
Always love talking with you too. Thank you very much.
Are you guys?
Okay. Oh,
Almost.
Wait,
Oh,
I just want to say hi, man. How are you?
hey, I'm good. How
I
are
just,
you?
I, good. I just wanted to just jump in. I know you've got things to do today, and you've been yakking for a long time, but I just wanted to say hi.
Hey,
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 Hank
Bill.
may have made it.
Oh, Hank might have made it.
I can't confirm or deny, but I've got some things in the pipeline, so you never know.
Never know. Never
So
know.
it is a alt history / sci-fi novel after all. So we have ways
Well,
and means.
I just hope he's not drawing flies.
No, definitely not. But yeah, no. Um, for those viewers who don't know, Bill, we spoke to on another episode as part of the Jimmy Dean's cast, and Bill played Hank, who was the antagonist in the book, and he did a fantastic job. So
So again, I thought you guys were done. I'm sorry I popped in and
no,
interrupted.
that's okay. I definitely welcome spontaneity on this show. It's the lifeblood of the show. So happy. I'm glad you popped in actually, because I wanted to see your face. So face to face, I don't get a chance to talk to you this way very often. So it's been really, really good. But yeah, thanks so much for your time, and I'll sign off.
AK, thank you very much. Have a
Thank you.
great day.
Good
Or
to see
You
you, my
evening.
too.
friend.